Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Teacher, and today we're going to read The Sky's the Limit. For as long as people have watched birds soar far above the earth, they have dreamed of being able to fly. The Montgolfier brothers of France, Jacques and Joseph, thought of a way this might be possible. In 1782, after observing smoke and hot air rising from a fire, they made a small cloth balloon and filled it with hot air. Then they watched it rise 70 feet. Hot air is less dense than cold air. This means that hot air is lighter. The warmer, lighter air inside the balloon caused it to rise. So this is the Montgolfier brothers, um, very important people in the creation of air travel, right, and flight. So here they discovered that hot air is lighter than cold air, right? So they used this theory and tested it with a cloth and observed how the smoke helped it to rise really high up in the air because of that hot air inside the cloth. So let's see what else they developed from this. The next year, they built a balloon with a diameter of 35 feet. They filled this one with hot air also. They burned wool and straw on an iron grate that rested in a large basket suspended beneath the balloon. This one rose successfully too. So they built another balloon that was even bigger. In September 1783, the Montgolfier brothers gathered a large crowd, which included the French royal family. The brothers placed a sheep, a duck, and a rooster in the balloon's basket and released it. The balloon ascended to a height of 1,500 feet. It stayed in the air for 8 minutes. Okay, so they invented the hot air balloon, right? A very amazing invention that later influenced more of air travel here. A hot air balloon rises because it is lighter than the air around it. But the idea that something heavier than air could ever get off the ground seemed absurd to most people. Not everyone thought so, however. By the late 1800s, after the invention of the steam engine, and later on the much lighter gasoline engine, the first airplanes were being made. Some of these had movable wings to mimic the flapping of birds' wings. These were too unwieldy to fly. Some were powered by steam engines. These were so heavy they couldn't get off the ground. So maybe it was a little bit silly to try and use steam engines because they were so heavy. When the airplane's frame was made lighter, the plane became flimsy. This was another big problem. Indeed, many early flights terminated in a crash. Some people believed that to fly in those days was almost a heroic act. So, while they were developing the airplanes, they used a lot of different techniques to try, right? And none of them were successful. So most of them would end in a crash. So it was really dangerous, right? If they were going to try and fly these planes, most likely they would crash, and sometimes from very up high in the sky, right? Which could end in a very bad outcome. It took another pair of brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright, to figure out how to build a machine that could stay up in the air. The Wright brothers made and repaired bicycles for a living at their shop in Dayton, Ohio. They were like the many other people at the time. The idea of flying fascinated them. They spent some time experimenting with kites and gliders. Then they built a plane with rigid wings that was powered by a small gasoline engine. This was much lighter than a steam engine. December 17th, 1903 is a significant date in the history of flying. On that day in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers demonstrated that a heavier than air machine could successfully fly. Just a handful of spectators were there to watch. The plane, with Orville Wright at the controls, began to lumber across the grassy field. The people cheered as they saw the plane lift off the ground. It stayed in the air for 12 seconds before landing about 120 feet away. So after a long time, finally, the Wright brothers here, they made a design for an airplane that actually could work, right? It mentioned this word here, lumber. The plane with Orville Wright at the controls began to lumber across the grassy field. So, of course, this is not lumber like wood from trees. This is going to be the verb lumber. It's an action, a movement, right? That afternoon, the Wright brothers made 3 more flights, the longest lasting 59 seconds and covered 852 feet. They had accomplished their goal. They had made it possible for humans to fulfill their dreams of flight. 100 years later, an exact copy of the Wright brothers' plane was built. To celebrate the 100th birthday of their achievement, it was supposed to make a flight in Kitty Hawk on December 17, 2003. It looked just like the Wright brothers' plane, but sadly it failed to get off the ground. You can see the airplane the Wright brothers built at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So even 100 years later, people tried to make an exact copy, an exact replica of the Wright brothers' plane and fly it again, but even they could not get it to fly. So it was quite the accomplishment what the Wright brothers did. Thank you for reading with me today. We do have links that are related to each of our articles here. If you'd like the link for this video, you can find it down in the description below.